The material you need for this is extra heavy gel medium, or maybe known as super heavy gel medium, and you need it to be gloss, not matte. There's a couple different kinds. I've used both, and both are just as effective. Going to use the Liquitex for this example. Okay, just take your silicone paintbrush, scoop up a little bit, just plop it down on your lid, and it already is starting to form peaks just when I plop it down. In this case, I'm going to make kind of a long wave here. You can see from the side. And you just kind of flick with the paintbrush to get it to stand up. And see there, I broke some of it off. That's just pop it back down and flick it again. And you see I've got several little peaks. See if I get a good picture of that. And that's all there is to it. If you want to do a splash where it's kind of a thinner line, I'll do several of them here. You can actually make these stand up quite tall. I've gotten them up to about 1 centimeter or so without them collapsing on themselves. And if you just kind of tease at it with the tip, with the little point of the paintbrush, you can get all kinds of neat little points to show up. As this dries, this is really going to look very cool because it comes out almost completely transparent. And now I use the smaller paintbrush that has just a pointed tip, and I could go in and actually make some like little grooves and tease that little point out a little further. Even make some grooves down here, because what you have flat on the surface, you'll also be able to peel that off and use once it's dry. So I'm going to make some little grooves coming out, and I'm going to make a groove back here. And you see, it's kind of a paste-like material, but you actually can sculpt if you're careful. I do the same thing with this. I'm going to add a couple of lines up the back. Okay, now I'm going to add a couple more pieces like splashes so that I have several to choose from. Now the reason that I sculpt these on a tray or a lid like this, instead of doing it directly on my project, is if I screw it up, no big deal. I haven't damaged my paint job on my project or the other elements of my project. On here, once they're dry, I can pick and choose which parts I use. I can trim it with scissors and just use sections that I want. I can use multiple sections together to get the effect that I want, and I don't have to worry about damaging my base project. It's way easier to go this route. Then the water effect, the splash effect, just becomes another element that you're adding to your project, rather than something that can be damaging it as you go. If you're doing like the wake of a boat, you can do a long line of peaks with a little flip at the top, like those. Let me show them from the side. That comes out kind of cool. These can take anywhere from overnight to a couple of days to dry, depending on how thick you make them. I like to do smaller, thinner pieces and then just combine as many as I need, rather than trying to make one big element and it maybe not coming out quite as good. I rarely have to go back with a paintbrush later on and make them stand back up again. As long as you are careful as you're handling it while you're working and you set it somewhere where it can dry and not be disturbed, these, you can see there, they're quite a bit of height. You'll retain that height when they dry. And you can combine multiple little splash effects, as many as you want. You can use PVA glue, you can use just a little bit more of this medium, you can use hot glue, super glue. It's all pretty effective with this. I find the PVA is the simplest and it tends to dry the clearest with it, but you can use pretty much any kind that you want. It's very forgiving. And once the stuff is cured and is clear and fully dry, it kind of has like a rubberized texture to it. It's a little bit flexible, and you'll just use a small tool to scrape it off of, or even your fingernail, to scrape it off of your plate that you're using, your lid, or what else you're using as your base. And then you've got a piece that looks something like, let me see if I have one here, like this. You can trim it, you can make it into whatever shape you want to attach. Okay, so those are ready to cure. I'm just going to set them aside. I'm not going to hit them with a hairdryer or anything like that. I'm just going to leave them alone. Here are some that I did about 3 hours ago. So you can see how much they have dried in about 3 hours time. One of them is completely clear already, but if you hold it like this, you can see that there's a little bit of a milkiness yet to it. I like to let those dry until I get as much of that out of there as possible. These obviously are not yet cured because they have the same white tone to them throughout, so don't touch them. But you'll notice that the very tip of these splashes are clear. They're starting to work their way down. They cure from the thinnest material to the thickest material, so you have to just let them sit and let them do their thing. And then once they're all fully cured, you can trim them. You can glue multiples on to get splash effects like these. Let's see if I can get a good close-up of that. Each one of those splashes of water is multiple little sections that I've glued on to this base to make it look like the water is splashing down in. And that's all there is to it. Very easy.